Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar about the future of invoicing. We believe that the future of invoicing is electronic invoicing. So it's a new way of sending and receiving invoices. Today we will talk about what electronic invoicing is, why it is important and how you can embrace it. I'd like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Jaap-Jan Nienhuis. I'm working for tradeinterop, and tradeinterop is an e-invoicing service provider. We help businesses connect their ERP, accounting, financial software to the financial software of their suppliers and buyers. And we do that by offering a cloud-based technology, so you don't have to install things on your own servers. It's fully cloud-based. We've been doing that for a couple of years, for 6 years, and we currently have more than 3,000 customers who use our technology to send and receive electronic invoices. We also have 2 colleagues from the Edge Consulting Group in this call. Anupam, can I give the floor to you?
Thanks, Jaap-Jan. Hi, everybody. I'm Anupam Bansal. I'm a partner with the Edge Consulting Group. Edge Consulting Group is the partner for tradeinterop solutions in the United Kingdom. As Jaap-Jan had mentioned, they have over 3,000 customers in the Netherlands and in Europe, in continental Europe, and we thought it was good for bringing that solution to the United Kingdom. As a consulting group, we can help the customers understand, implement, and use e-invoicing. We can help you navigate both the payments and billing landscape, including e-invoicing and e-procurement, and to make the most out of e-invoicing. And without further ado, I give the floor back to Jaap-Jan. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Anupam, for that introduction. So let's dive into the primary topics of today. We would like to discuss 3 things. The first is, what is electronic invoicing and how has invoicing developed in the past years from mainly manual paperwork to fully automated touchless processes? And secondly, why is it important for you? Why is it relevant right now? And what drives electronic invoicing and the developments behind it? And how should you respond? What actions can you take tomorrow to embrace electronic invoicing and to prevent the potential mistakes that I told about earlier? So let's dive into these 3 topics. Now let's start with looking at how invoicing happens in the past, and even today sometimes invoicing is done like this. So there's an employee at a financial department that enters data into an ERP or an accounting software, and that data is stored in the software, and then the software creates a PDF invoice, sometimes even a paper invoice, but in most cases creates a PDF invoice, and this PDF invoice is sent via email to the receiver. Now the receiver has to manually enter it into their systems. Sometimes they partly automate that process by using scanning software to enter it into the system, but still it is an error-prone process, and a lot of errors are made in either the scanning part or the manual entry part. But at the end, the invoice ends up in the procurement software or financial software or ERP software of the receiver, and it's processed further. So this is the process that happens today, and if you look at timelines, the entire process takes between 5 and 30 days, and there's been a lot of research in the cost of processing paper invoices, and with very different outcomes. But in general, the cost of processing paper or PDF invoices is estimated between 10 and 80 pounds per invoice. But imagine if we would rethink such processes with the internet in mind, in an era where we do basically everything via the internet. How would invoicing look like, and how would the internet transform traditional invoicing processes? Now we think it would look like this. There's still the financial employee who enters data into his financial system, ERP system, CRM system, whatever system he uses. And then rather than creating a PDF invoice, that invoice data is straight submitted from the ERP system via the internet to the system of the receiver. And that can be procurement software, that can be financial software, but there's no manual typing or scanning of invoices to get the invoice into. So this is how invoicing will look like in the future, and more businesses today start to migrate to this invoicing process. PEPL is a standard which defines how an e-invoice looks like. For example, where in this standard do we put an invoice number? Where do we put the amount excluding VAT? And where do we put an amount including VAT, etc.? So it's a standard about how can we exchange an invoice. At the same time, it is also a protocol, because you can create a standardized invoices in one software package, but you still need to send it in a secure and a reliable way to the receiving software. That's also a protocol that PEPL caters for. And thirdly, it is what we call a governance framework. So what PEPL does, it creates a trust network between e-invoicing providers, financial software packages, in such a way that we know, for example, that if you receive an invoice via the PEPL network from a specific company, then you are absolutely sure that it is that company who sent it. PEPL is active in 34 countries today. Most of these countries are European countries, but it's also being used in the UK by the NHS. It's being used in the United States and Canada, Australia, South Africa, Japan. Some countries are quite mature in the use of PEPL. Other countries are now rolling it out, but the technology is available in many countries and is expanding also. Now, if you look at the use of PEPL, it is currently mandated by a number of government bodies in the EU. That means that EU government institutions require their supplier to send in their invoices electronically via PEPL. So if you are a UK supplier to a government institution somewhere in the EU, then the chances are big that you need to send these invoices via the PEPL network. And there are even talks now within the EU of making PEPL the mandatory standard and protocol for exchanging invoices between businesses among each other. That becomes a really strong driver of electronic invoicing. Now, PEPL is implemented by more than 490 software vendors, different categories ranging from ERP vendors, CRM vendors, financial software providers, e-invoicing providers, procurement providers, etc. Now, in the next couple of slides, I want to discuss with you why this is important and what really drives the adoption of electronic invoicing in the market. One of our customers and compared the different invoicing processes they have. So they have a paper invoice process, and they have a number of steps they execute to handle paper invoices. And these steps are first handling, so they have to get the paper invoice out of the envelope, put it in the scanner, check if the invoice is basically an authentic invoice, check if the content is correctly recognized by the scanner, if you use scanning software, or is correctly entered into the system by a human, basically. Then the invoice data need to be enriched and processed further. And with processing, I mean it goes into a workflow probably, and it goes into approval process and into your financial system. Now, this case study moved for a part of their invoices to PDF invoices, and basically there's a gain with that because you eliminate your handling of paper. So you don't need to get paper out of the envelope, but you still need to execute a scanning process to check the authenticity of the invoice and to check if the content is correctly recognized or entered into the system. You have to enrich it and process it. But then the big advantage comes if you look at the e-invoicing process of that company, because they could eliminate additional steps. They could eliminate the scanning step and the authenticity step. Now, enrichment partly remains the same, and the processing, of course, remains largely the same in the sense that the electronic invoicing still needs to be routed get the appropriate approvals within the company, etc. But what we saw, if we compared the cost of processing these invoices, compared paper and electronic, you see that there's a cost saving potential of 67%. And this is a very conservative estimate because we know that this only takes into account the elimination of manual processes. But there are other cost benefits involved. So these 67% cost saving potential is only a tip of the iceberg, so to say. Now, how should you move forward and what should you do? We see that any electronic invoicing process requires a number of stakeholders that should be on board, and it's really important to have them on board. And we often categorize the internal stakeholders, buyers and suppliers, so basically your trading partners, and software providers. In a visual, it looks like this. On the left side, there's your company with your business software. On the right side, there are your customers and your suppliers, governments, SMEs, large corporations, and we are in between connecting your software with their software via different ways, and Peppol is obviously, in our view, the most powerful way to do it. That brings me to the end of this presentation. I think there are three important takeaways of this presentation, and I hope you take these three key points with you. And the first is electronic invoicing is inevitable. It is going to happen, and sooner rather than later, your customers and your suppliers will ask you about moving towards electronic invoicing. The second is Peppol is a global standard, and it's really, if you move into electronic invoicing, it's really important to adopt Peppol because that makes it a lot simpler for you. And the third takeaway is that implementation is not complex. The technology is available. It's not very difficult to implement, but it requires internal alignment. So you have to talk to finance, to procurement, and to ICT. You have to collaborate with your supplier, and you have to talk to your software to see if you can use existing software or you probably need new tools and new services. Yeah, and so this brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for listening in. I hope again it was useful for you, and hope to speak to you in the future. Thank you very much and have a good evening.